Hi, and welcome to Dark Window. I'm your host, Jim Mann. Here on this program, I will be talking with many of the leading investigators, researchers, and authors on the topics of UFOs, UAPs, alien abductions, extraterrestrials, and a host of many other fascinating and related topics. So please join me and my guest for the next hour as we reach out. This is Dark Window on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. And with that, hello, everyone, and welcome to Dark Window. I am your host, Jim Mann, and for the next hour, we're going to be talking to a very special guest, Alejandro Rojas. I have known Alejandro for about 15 years. I consider him a friend, and he is one of the most plugged-in UFO people that I know, and I'm proud to have him on my program. Now, Alejandro is the head of research and content at Enigma Labs, a data research and community platform dedicated to unidentified aerial phenomena. He is also a founding board member and director of public relations for the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, SCU. Alejandro has been a freelance journalist focused on science, space, sci-fi, and UFOs. He maintains the website Open Minds TV, but you can also find his articles in the Huffington Post, Den of Geek, and the Roswell Daily Record, among other news medias, or outlets, I should say. Alejandro is considered an expert on the topic of UAPs. You will see Alejandro in interviews with the media, other organizations worldwide, including Politico, the BBC, NBC, Fox, Coast to Coast AM, the Travel Channel, Sci-Fi Channel, National Geographic, and E, which is entertainment television. And Alejandro, welcome, and how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, it's great to have you. You know, we're kind of excited about this. You are actually officially our third guest for broadcast, and I know everybody at KGRA as well as us are kind of excited to see what you have to say, because
cool.
You are the plugged-in person.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to be on the show and be one of your first guests. I think, I was excited when you said you were going to have a podcast because a lot popping up, but you're someone who, has spent years in this field. So I think that your voice is an important one to have out there. So I'm happy that you're doing this.
Well, I'm trying to hang in there and trying to keep pace with everything. And good golly, what you and I have seen just in the last 15 or 20 years, how far we've come with this whole business of UFOs and UAPs. It's incredible. And we're going to talk about some of that tonight. Let me ask you a question. And I know you kind of know this. Is the government serious about finding answers this time? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tough one to answer right now. And here are the signals. Here's why. Congress seems very motivated to get some research done. Partially, no doubt, because they've had these kind of closed door meetings, briefings lately. And I don't think any politician has come out of those briefings not thinking that the topic is serious and it needs more study. So they're certainly motivated, but they're politicians as well. So I think how long will that motivation last? I think what people wonder, and there was a lot of talk about this even when Hillary was running for president, because John Podesta, her campaign manager, was so into this topic. And I think he felt there's a UFO vote out there. And is there? I don't know. I think at that time, it wasn't for sure. I don't think her campaign was sold completely on that, even though John Podesta was. Prior to that, we had Dennis Kucinich, had a sighting that came out in Shirley MacLaine's book. He was asked about that at a presidential debate, and it kind of sunk his whole campaign when he said, yeah, I saw something, I don't know what it was. Mm-hmm. And then it actually went to Obama, and he made kind of a little bit of a joke. He just said, I'm focused on things that are more earthly or something like that. And everybody chuckled. So and that ended his campaign at that time. So it wasn't seen that there was a UFO vote, but I think that they feel there is now, and I think that they should have probably felt there was one because the polls,
Mhm.
show that there is even a new YouGov poll out today. I believe people can go. Oh, look, I got my Twitter right there. People can go to my Twitter, and I tweeted
Mhm.
it. But it showed that more than 50% people out there believe in this topic. So that there's something to this. And I think the poll even said more than 50% believe that UFOs were aliens. So there's a lot of people out there. There probably is a vote for it. And I think this is also the Democrats, trying to get some of the Trump voters a little bit, some of the more conspiratorial or fringe type of voters. So there's that aspect going on, but they're certainly very motivated. So then we get to the DoD. They're the Pentagon. They're the ones who are supposed to do something about this. Are they motivated? That's the tough one to answer, and I think that they haven't been recently. All of this came about when in 2017 in December, as we know, when the New York Times
Mhm.
revealed that the Pentagon had a UAP project. We actually found out about that a couple months before in October, like it is now, when Lou Elizondo had come out and said he was going to work with Tom DeLonge with To the Stars, and he said, "I'm a guy who used to work with the Pentagon investigating UAP." And a lot of us are like, "What are you talking about, Pentagon?" And they've been denying that they have had
That was
any
sort of a
interest in the
shock
topic since
to many.
1969. Exactly,
Yeah.
it was a shock. So, um, he came out in the New York Times article. Politico wrote one as well, and it became, this huge deal. But that was a lot of people, and I think the Politico author Brian Bender made a good point. He was like, "This wasn't something the Pentagon asked for; it was something that was thrust upon them by Harry Reid in particular, and a couple of other legislators who wanted to put funding into investigating this sort of thing." At the time, this was the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Application Program,
Yeah.
OSAP, which was looking at Skinwalker and a bunch of paranormal. Eventually, they kind of tapered that down into a project called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which Elizondo
ATIP.
ran, that was focused, yep, ATIP, that was just focused on military UFO sightings. Um, and so that was happening. And the people that were working on the inside on this were, of course, very excited about the topic. We've all heard from Lou Elizondo now. He's obviously very excited about the topic and
Are
motivated about the topic.
Excuse me, are you still working with Lou?
I'm not. Lou is now, and this was not publicly known until recently, or at least acknowledged.
Mhm.
He's working with the space commands slash
Oh, is
space
he?
force, because they're kind of all mixed together. I think it's technically space force, but he's working with space force, and he usually, assumingly on UAP topics. I guess I can't say that for sure, but that's what it sounds like he's doing, which is, of course, very interesting. That shows there's some interest there, but you know, um, and I guess getting into that, Lou worked with OSAP and ATIP, and it was famously Robert Bigelow who was and his Bigelow Aerospace company that was contracted to run this OSAP program for a while. Jay Stratton, that's his name. He eventually, after Lou had retired and left, became head of the UAP task force. That was the first kind of DoD led modern UAP project, and it was headed by the Navy. That's significant because soon after that New York Times article came out, everybody was really excited about the case that they covered, the 2004 Nimitz incident where the giant 40-foot Tic Tac was seen, or a Tic Tac shaped object, jets chased
Right.
it. There's kind of a
Yes.
cat and mouse. We've heard from the pilots, we've heard from a lot of the witnesses. And the Navy, after a couple of years later, came out and said, we take them seriously. We're backing our guys. They say they saw a UAP, they saw a UAP. We believe that was a UAP. We take UAP seriously. And that was a big moment because that was finally the government coming out and saying, we do take this seriously. And it was the Navy. That actually was a big deal because the guy working with Lou Elizondo to get all this information out was Chris Mellon. Chris
Right.
Mellon used to
That's
work for Congress as a deputy director of intelligence. He would essentially brief them on Black projects and the sort of thing. And he went to his colleagues and said, "Hey, you guys haven't been briefed on this UAP stuff, have you?" And they're like, "No." And he's like, "Well, now that they've admitted they take it seriously and they've done some investigation, don't you think you should?" And they were like, "Yeah." And so, that's when we started having Congress getting involved and saying, "We want to know more." That's when these Nimitz people and other Navy and intelligence people were then briefing Congress. We saw this on the History Channel show Unidentified, which starred Chris Mellon and Tom DeLonge and Lou Elizondo, where they were doing these briefings. And those briefings were obviously very significant. I don't think there's been one lawmaker who's come out of a briefing not saying that this is a very important topic that we need to take seriously.
Now,
So
Christopher, I'm sorry, Christopher Mellon goes all the way back to the Clinton administration,
right.
correct?
He worked in the Clinton administration, Bush administration. He's been a big deal in Washington, D.C. for a long time. And the Mellon is from the Mellon family. I mean, the famous, the Mellons, Mellon banking. So, he's definitely a plugged in and super influential person, very into this topic. And I think a lot of the guiding of the government on this topic has been coming from him. He's definitely been a big advisor for a lot of insiders. And I think that's to the benefit of a lot of us who are interested in this topic, because he's extremely intelligent and he's really holding their feet to the fire. So we saw this Navy group pop up. Then we saw another group pop up under intelligence, more under like defense intelligence. The thing was, though, that they some of their messaging coming from the DoD, John Kirby in particular, who was a spokesperson, was saying, we're going to look into cases. We've got the Navy collecting cases. We're going to investigate these and we're going to figure some stuff out. Well, the Congress wasn't really happy with that at the time, because by then they had already been asking in legislation, putting into their bill, the Defense Authorization Act, that they wanted UAP research to be done. But what they were calling for was not just starting UAP research ground up. They were like, hey, we had decades of UAP research going on. We had 3 projects. We had Sign, Grudge, Blue Book, maybe others. You need to look at that data as well and work with civilians who have been collecting information even since then. So there's an abundance of information out there that you can use to start to analyze and figure things out now. You need to look at that sort of stuff. But they weren't, really indicating that they wanted to do that. There's a Politico article from Brian Bender again that came out, in May in May, and soon after where lawmakers were expressing this. They were saying, we are not happy with what they're saying. They're not doing what we asked them to do. We're going to hold them accountable. We want them to do X, Y, and Z. And that's when you heard the hearings being announced, and the congressional hearing that happened just a few months ago. And their tone was much different. In that hearing, their tone was, we're going to do what you want. We're going to look at this historical stuff. We're going to do everything you're asking us to do. So that's what they're saying. There were a couple of concerning things that happened in that hearing, though, that I think that where they're still, I think this is their tactic. Their tactic has always been a wait and see. Most of the motivation to do something about this topic comes from public interest and big public interest.
Yeah.
But that is often not, it often doesn't last long. It lasts as long as a news cycle.
Public
so I think
pressure,
they're trying
too.
right. I mean, as long as it's in the news, that's when they're gonna get that pressure. And I think that they were trying to wait it out because, even in those hearings, they weren't well prepared. They obviously hadn't done much research. Really, the only thing we got out of them is, we're going to do this. We're going to do what you're saying. UAPs are serious. UAPs are a big deal. We don't know what they are. We're going to do all this. So that was the good stuff. Otherwise, the stuff that they presented was kind of stupid, kind of I don't know if that's the best word to use, but it wasn't that great. It was silly, and it was condescending in some cases. So there was a case out there that Jeremy Corbell had been sharing with the public, where he said these were triangular shaped UAP that had been kind of invading this ship. They debunked that and said these were drones. These were just drones. This
Oh,
is an
really?
example of how the public goes crazy with something and then they get it totally wrong. And they were kind of right.
Yes, I was about to say they're kind of right there. Kind of.
Exactly. They were kind of right. But then a lot of people were saying, wait a second. Okay, those are drones. But what the hell are a bunch of drones doing then, coming and flying around a Navy ship and, willy nilly, and we don't know what they are. And some of the Navy guys think they're UFOs. What's up with that? So, which gets back to a little bit of what Chris Mellon was saying, is that by ignoring UAP, we are blinding ourselves to things that might not be UAP, that might be Chinese or Russian, but we're blowing it off and we're ignoring it because we think it's UAP. We can't do that,
Exactly.
like this drone situation, because the US is typically focused on cutting edge technologies. So what we've identified lately, and I mean that the Pentagon has identified, and that's gotten into this conversation, is kind of what's going on in Ukraine. I think it was just today even, there was some cheap drones that they're able to put munitions on, fly those into like a gas tanker and explode it. So you've got this big supply depot on fire, Russian supply depot on fire in the Ukraine, and all they used were these cheap little drones. So I mean, the drone technology and these cheaper kind of guerrilla warfare kind of tactics that you can do with low level electronics now is the type of thing we have a blind spot for, that now is getting kind of more full. And it was really kind of this conversation that helped do that, to say, look, UAP are sometimes things that you guys are ignoring that are important, that we need to pay attention to. And the Ukraine has kind of put an exclamation mark on that. So there was that aspect of things, certainly. But the other thing they did was show a UFO video, and it was ridiculous. It was, this little small round thing that goes through the screen so quickly that it's only in a frame or two. Also, there's this whole ridiculous part of the hearing where they're trying to get them to freeze a frame on that object, because no one had thought of, maybe I should get a screenshot of that object to show people. So they spent, I don't know, 5-10 minutes in this real awkwardness where they're trying to go back and forth on the video to freeze on it. But their point was, this is the type of data we're dealing with. And that was completely disingenuous, because certainly they get crappy UFO videos. We all see crappy UFO videos, but we know for a fact, and they have admitted, that they have very good UFO videos.
They
Congress
do.
people, others have said they've seen some of those videos. Just recently, John Greenwald had discovered that they claim they have 22 of these sorts of videos that they're not sharing. They're classified. So they could have shown something better than this. I mean, that little thing was still kind of speaking to the skeptics and debunkers, saying, there's still reason for you guys to be skeptical on this topic, especially when this is the kind of crap videos we deal with. What they should have been mentioning were cases like Nimitz, where you have video, you have radar data, you have eyewitnesses, several highly trained, pilot eyewitnesses, including the commander of that wing, the fighter jet wing,
Right,
who
yeah.
chased the Tic Tac object. So there was still a little indication to show that maybe the DoD isn't completely on board. But I think there's a lot of conversations around secrecy that aren't being addressed, that would make it difficult for the DoD to tackle this topic also. So in the past, we've heard that whatever the UAP research groups do is classified. We have no intention of sharing what cases we're looking at, where, who, what, when, why, or anything. Have no intentions to share anything. And even when Chris Mellon was suggesting that the Congress pursue this issue, he said, I realize that it's probably going to have to be in a classified setting. Fortunately, Congress said, no, we want some public information as well. So that's what they've been advocating for. And supposedly we're supposed to get a second report this month.
Oh,
that
really? Okay.
shares some information with the public.
I
So we'll get a better idea when or if that report comes out. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to say you answered my next question. It was why there have been so many governmental UFO organizations lately. And can you talk about some of these ones? We've got some notes here in front of us, Alejandro.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about some of those. We have the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force,
Yeah.
UAPTF. We have AIMSOG. We have ARROW.
Yep.
We talked about that
Yeah.
before we hit the record button here, but can you kind of outline
Yeah.
some of those?
So I've already kind of outlined the first couple of groups, which are a couple of the acronyms, because we're all, of course, this is the
Yeah.
alphabet soup. So we went from OSAP to ATIP, the paranormal kind of investigation, to the UFO, military UFO investigation. Everything got blown, everything got exposed in 2017 New York Times. Interesting enough, Lou's buddies were gone. Like, Lou was not alone when he was coming out. He had a lot of friends who were investigating, doing research, and he was expecting that they would kind of come out and help him and try to help push this, but they were kind of freaked out. They stayed in the background. So we didn't hear much from the government until the Navy said, we're going to take this seriously. Soon after that, it was announced that Naval Intelligence was starting up a group called the UAP Task Force. Lou Elizondo told us this is just a continuation of ATIP. The DoD press said, press people said, no, that's not true. But the US DoD press people have been wrong a lot. I mean, they've been giving a lot of misinformation about all of this stuff as it's gone along, especially regarding to Lou Elizondo. But it turns out Lou was right, because the guy who headed up the UAP task force, Jay Stratton, he was part of OSAP also. So it was a continuation, and he's confirmed that. And so supposedly a lot was going on at that time, them creating relationships with departments, because the first thing they've got to do is go find out what information everybody has so they can gather it, have people share that information with them so they can analyze it. But then the DoD kind of changed course and said they were going to shut down the UAP task force and create a new group under like the Defense Secretary, or the Undersecretary of Defense Intelligence, and which was a little bit concerning, because that's where Lou had come from, and he felt that they weren't open to really taking the topic seriously. Also, this is when this new group was talking about just looking at information, just starting to gather information that they would look into, which, of course, like we had reviewed, that's not what the Congress wanted. They wanted something bigger and better. So then we had the hearings where DoD finally got the message. We want something bigger and better. Oh, by the way, that group that I'm talking about was called the AIOMSG. And then in the hearings, they actually used a different acronym, AIMSOG, AIMSOG.
AIMSOG.
And actually, I could go look them up and read to you what those mean, but it doesn't even matter anymore, because now they're gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. Whew. I wouldn't have remembered
Yeah, that's a mouthful.
It's in front of me.
But now it's changed, because during the hearings, and they're like, look, we're going to do everything you want us to do. Then it was announced soon after the hearings in July that we're going to create a new group. We got a new group now that is going to do this, and their acronym is ARROW, AARO. They're the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. So that's the new organization. We've heard that it's being ran by, I think his name is Sean Kirkpatrick, who is supposedly a physicist, or at least he has a degree in physics, and he's more science oriented, although he is a policy guy from what I understand, which isn't a bad thing. He just knows how to get things done. He's an administrator. Right. So they're just started up. I think that I've heard that they've had a couple hires thus far. So the question is, are they going to have this report come out?
Yeah, what I've got here in front of me is that this is ARROW started in August. That's how new?
Well, they were announced in July,
Okay.
but yeah, in August, I think is when they probably just got rolling.
And now they look into sea, air, and space. I mean, they're the
Yeah,
what we would call unidentified submerged objects, unidentified
yeah,
flying objects, and then in space.
that's what's really cool. So, Arrow is still under the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, um, but you know, which is where Lou was also. But to your point, one of the great things is, and this is a congressional thing, because Congress has been listening to like Chris Mellon and these former
Mhm.
these UAPTF guys and everything, and Elizondo and others. So they're kind of more up to speed. So at the SCU, the term we've used the term UAP for years. We've always used that term because that's what science likes. Um, UAP initially was unidentified aerial phenomena. However, at SCU, we use the term unidentified aerospace phenomena to include more than just things flying in the air. However, they've taken that even further, and wisely so. And I think this is great because they also are interested in USOs, unidentified submerged objects, which
Submerged
have been
objects, yes.
we've called for years. That those of us UFO researchers have been into that topic for a long time. And in the Nimitz situation, they felt they had something like that going on when the object that they chased was above something that was in the water. So there could have been a larger object under the water. Either way, apparently, it sounds like they're hearing from the Navy about USOs. In fact, during the hearings, one of the Congress people said, "What about USOs, underwater objects?" And they said, "We'll take that. We'll tell you about that in the classified section." So
Exactly.
they took that totally offline. But Congress has been using the verbiage UAP to stand for now, and this is new in the last couple of months, unidentified aerial and submerged objects. So
Oh,
now it's all encompassing. And I really like that terminology because, yeah, it encompasses all of that phenomena. Because not only if something can go what they call transmedium, so it can go from the
right.
air into the water, like the Aguadilla case that we investigated with the SCU,
The Tic
Aguadilla,
Tac
Puerto
UFO.
Rico. Yeah, they saw this object go under the water and out with no loss of speed. We don't know any type of propulsion that can do that currently that we have. So that sort of thing is important. Another thing that transmedium issue that's really important that Chris Mellon has brought up is what about space? He asked the question, have you guys tracked these things coming in or out of space? And he has not gotten an answer. They've all nobody's answered that question. Because if we've caught something on satellite that can go from the air into space or back and forth, that's obviously very significant because
Right.
we have rockets that'll do that, but there's very few types of propulsion that we use that are able to do that.
Um, speaking of space, do you think is NASA getting involved in this? To your
They are.
knowledge, what's
Yes, that NASA has announced that they are going to start a group. They've assigned a couple scientists to it who are doing research right now. I know they're reaching out to scientific UAP research organizations and asking questions. And I think right now they're just trying to get a lay of the land. They're trying to find who are the scientists that are interested in doing work on this topic. What are their thoughts? And then taking that information, what can we do as NASA? And that's where they are. So their current project is still going to last a few more months, but that's what they're doing is information gathering right now, with the intent, though, to start a project here probably early next year.
so you've been pretty close to a lot of this going on
Hmm.
recently, and I say recently, I mean the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Um, Seriously, what do you think they will be sharing with the general public? Where do you think they'll draw the line?
Well, that's a great question, and that's why I feel um, not to have your expectations too high when it comes to the Pentagon.
Hmm.
Um, they're obviously very secretive already, but I think there's a lot of, I at one point called them invisible elephants, elephants with
Yeah.
cloaking devices on in the room. And what I mean by that is that the the military has talked about the need for secrecy and how they
Mhm.
can't share much information, but they haven't explained why. Why do you need secrecy around UFOs? So what happens with a lot of the public is they think, well, obviously they don't want to tell us aliens are here. But it's much more complicated than that. One of the things that they announced recently is that their definition of UAP means that they will not look at man-made objects. So everybody thought, oh, they're admitting that they're from space or they're not human-made. Not necessarily. What they're saying is if they are human-made, that's not a UAP, which obviously it's not. Um, and the reason why is that we already have organizations, foreign technology organizations that deal with human made objects, even if they're not identified. If we think it's human technology, we don't know whose it is, but we want to look into it. We send that to groups that already have been existing for decades that examine foreign technology, at Area 51 too, where they're flying around Russian planes and Chinese planes that we've captured or maybe bought on the black market. Who knows how they got that stuff? So that's we'll go there.
I mean,
But
bottom
this
line
is
is,
the issue.
does UFO really mean aliens? I mean, you and I
We
have been
don't
doing
know.
this a long time.
Yeah, it means unidentified. So we don't know. It's
Exactly.
unidentified. We're still looking into it. Um, but here's the problem: if you're working for the military and you've got a UAP case, you don't want to call it non-human or not Chinese or Russian unless you're 100% sure. Because what if you're wrong? And it turns out we just told the world, hey, we don't know what this is. And it's Chinese technology. What if the Tic Tac is a Chinese? Of course, the Tic Tac, the way it's described, 40-foot, huge, white, traveling around, hovering, and then
Transmedia.
traveling at these ridiculous speeds. That's way beyond our technology. China's or Russian. So that one's a little more safe. But when it
Mhm.
comes down to these cases, I mean, you're going to want to be really careful. There's so many issues. Or let's say that they're working with MUFON, and MUFON is gathering data and investigating cases, and the military is working with them, but then they're like, oh, you know what, that's ours. But they can't, or we know that's Chinese, or we know that's Russian, but they can't tell MUFON, even though MUFON needs to know to have clean
That
data,
would be
or us,
classified.
what we're doing. But yeah, that's classified information.
Right.
So there's a lot of really sticky situations when it comes around the secrecy, and this is why it needs to be secret. Also, disinformation. I think that there have been a couple studies, and we've even seen this where the military has used UFOs for disinformation. One area I can think of that is, and this isn't necessarily disinformation, but where the UFO topic worked in their favor, and that was with the U2 in the CIA document that uncovered, or at least was the first time they used the term Area 51 publicly. It's actually a document that talks about the history of Area 51.
Right.
And they talked about how the U2 caused a lot of UFO sighting reports. And they would let them believe that they were UFOs, mostly because the U2 was flying much higher than any other plane could fly at the time or was supposed to be flying at the time. So pilots would see something up there flying and they would report it as a UFO. And not only did the people at Area 51 not want to correct people, they loved people thinking they were UFOs because then wouldn't notify the Russians that we've got this U2 flying around, even though Russians were able to shoot one down. But so that's where it's really sticky, and I think that it's going to be difficult to rely on a lot of information from the military because it's just such a difficult, sticky situation. That's why my hopes lie in groups like NASA or other civilian research organizations like the SCU or like
Right.
what we're doing at Enigma Labs.
Do you actually think the government is looking for aliens?
I don't know. That's really tough to know because there's a couple schools of thought on that.
Yeah.
There's that they know already that these things are alien, or there's the other that maybe they suspect and they are, vigorously trying to find out, or that they don't care. It's ignorance. They don't want to know. They'd rather bury their head in the sand and not deal with it. It's hard to know where they are on that scope, and I don't think we have strong evidence to really point to anything, except for that there's an abundance of that latter category. So there's abundance of ignorance.
Hmm.
There's no doubt around the topic. So those people who blow off the topic from the get-go, obviously they're not going to care or think that there's anything like aliens. And I don't have, there's certainly insiders such as the whole OSAP group, all of those group of people that worked with Bigelow, just like Bigelow, who said famously on 60 Minutes, he's like, aliens are here. I know that. They've been here for a long time. And, he was asked by the 60 Minutes reporter, aren't you, don't you worry that people are going to think that you're kind of crazy or something? And he said, I can give a damn. Those guys are all certain that that's going on, and they're all government contractors. Obviously, they were government contractors for Bigelow, but they've also worked on other projects. So Hal Puthoff has been a government project. They all hold classifications. They all hold, work on classified projects. But Hal Puthoff has been working on government projects his entire career. Eric Davis, another scientist that was part of the Bigelow group, is also currently he works for the aerospace company. Jay Stratton,
Hmm.
along with what's his first name, Taylor, who is on the Skinwalker television show.
Skinwalker, yes.
Yeah, both of them now are working on classified projects for a defense company in Alabama. So these are all people that have worked on government contracts, and they're certain. Now, are they certain because of their own personal experiences?
You're talking about Dr. Travis Taylor?
Dr. Travis Taylor, exactly.
Right.
That's who I'm talking about. Him and Stratton just recently got jobs for a defense corporation
Oh, seriously.
that are working
Okay.
on energy weapons out of Alabama. But Tim and Travis is not convinced it's aliens, but I think most of the rest of them are. And one piece of evidence where you can find that out, including the DIA guy who ran the OSAP project for the DIA, Lukatsky, he recently wrote a book with George Knapp from Las Vegas, a reporter who's close with Bigelow and has been reporting on all this stuff for a long time, and Colm Kelleher, Bigelow's right-hand man, Bigelow's lead scientist. They wrote a book with Lukatsky called Skinwalker at the Pentagon, where they outline all of this, and they make it very clear that they believe all this phenomena. And this is what I've been trying to tell people, because this is the headline, is that the government spent $22 million on a paranormal project where the contractor who was sent in to research all of this stuff looked at tons of different paranormal topics, determined they were all real, and the DIA guy in charge of the whole project for the DIA agreed with them. A $22 million paranormal project where the conclusion was that it's all real.
Yeah, I heard that.
It's a crazy situation.
Yeah. I mean, this is where science can actually step forward and help. I
Yeah.
mean, Bigelow with his National Institute of Discovery Science, I don't think that's in play anymore, is it?
No,
NIDS?
that
I think
ended
that's,
in I think early 2000s before
yeah.
Bigelow, and then he started Bigelow Advanced Aerospace, Advanced Space Systems, which was
Yeah,
the group
advanced
that
space.
worked with OSAP.
Right, yeah. But if we think about it, I'm going to ask you this. How do you think science can actually help us in these areas?
Yeah, this is what's exciting, and that's where I'm focused. This is where I live. I'm not a scientist myself, but of course, I'm more of a facilitator, administrator, and when it comes to the company I work for, the UAP expert. So I think science can definitely help. There's a lot. At SCU before 2017, and we were a pretty small group. So, you've got a few people doing their best to make some reports, but we came up with some pretty good. But now there are more and more and more and more scientists getting involved. So it's really exciting. And I think that more can be found on a couple fronts. There are theoretical fronts that are really helpful. So theorizing around propulsion, and it's different when, a bunch of people do that on Twitter than actual physicists, actual scientists, because they can write papers where it's backed by actual science. So this is real stuff that could happen. The important part of that is then we can kind of speculate, okay, here are the types of propulsions they may be using. What kind of equipment then do we have to develop or can we gather to monitor the indicators that would show us they're using this sort of technology? So, for instance, the rosin bridge or whatever, there's certain types of kind of warp technology that will emit certain type of radiation. So we can get radiation readers to measure that to see if when there is a sighting, if we're catching any of that sort of
There's
radiation.
a signature that's left over that they can actually
Exactly.
look at.
So, all of that makes all of this smarter, where we get more equipment, we theorize to gather more data. The other side of the data factor is working with that data. So at Enigma, we're working on an app where we've got a ton of UFO sighting report data from all over the world in there, and we're getting more all the time. So people can go in there and start to do some trend analysis. Where are things? Where are triangular UFOs historically? Where are this type or that type? We're also using machine learning to score these. So instead of like at SCU, we've got to go one at a time. People have to go through every case. Is this a good case? Yes. Is this a good case? No. Literally takes years. But with our app, we're going to be able to instantly score them. And so you'll be instantly be able to say, I want only cases that are at 10. So you'll get a bunch of cases that are substantial cases. So then you can trend around that. Okay, what's the nature of these? Are they around nuclear bases or locations? That's one thing that SEU is looking into. Are they what are the characteristics of the different shaped craft? Are they around water? And the ones that are around water or going in and out of water, where is that happening? It's Enigma Labs. Enigma is the name of the app.
Yeah, we need to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah,
because this is a software app, correct? And
and
let me just back up a little minute here, Alejandro. We've seen sort of a running forward of the scientific community recently. They're starting to get on board. Why do you think they were so opposed to begin with?
A few reasons. One is funding. Not that there's definitely funding now, but there's more funding potentially coming from the government and NASA. But the taboo is huge for scientists. With scientists, your credibility is very, very important. It's everything. And if you risk your reputation, you're risking your work. And so that's why scientists are the most shy around this topic. And even with the SCU, a lot of the scientists we have don't use their real name because they don't want their name to get out there publicly. In fact, you probably know Diana Pasulka.
Yeah.
I asked her, with your students, what do you tell them about getting into this topic? Is it dangerous for their careers? And she said, oh, yeah. I tell my students, don't touch anything weird until you're tenured. So, I mean, that's how it gives you an idea of just how getting associated with a topic like this can really have a negative effect on your career as a scientist. But that's loosening up.
Yeah,
Not,
I mean
I would
this
say universally yet, but in
right.
pockets where there are now more organizations and universities kind of like Kevin Knuth is part of SU, Dr. Kevin Knuth. He's excellent. He works out of Albany. One of his colleagues, Matthew Zydagas, also, both of them were kind of in the astrophysics kind of arena. Their university's been okay with it. Of course, I think they're both tenured, right? At least I'm pretty sure. I know Knuth is, but so there are some institutions that are now starting to be like, it's okay for you guys to do that,
Yeah.
whereas we didn't have that in the past.
Well, I think this rolls across the full spectrum of academia because we're talking about archaeology, anthropology, geology.
Yes.
I mean, even into the more the psychology and things like that used to be a killer for your career. But I think that's slowly turning around, don't you think?
I think it's definitely turning around. It's the slowest area for that turnaround to happen, but it's definitely happening.
Yeah.
And that's exciting because that's what's really opening these doors, and I think are going to open the doors to discovery in this topic. I think eventually, academia will start to spend more money. We've seen a little bit of it. We've seen a couple of um, UAP grants popping up here and there for
Hmm.
students to do like papers on UAP or even their um, yeah to do work on that. So that's really exciting, and I think we're going to see more of that. And the science that's getting done out there right now, it's still slow, but it's much quicker than it was. And I think it's great. And I think that we're going to make a lot of discoveries. I mean, I am so confident. When it comes to creating an app or a database that can be um, researched and analyzed, tools to do
Hmm.
that sort of thing, to look at cases. Everybody's been wanting to do that. Blue Book wanted to do it. Of course, technology wasn't necessarily there. Bigelow and their group have wanted to do it. TTSA has wanted to do it. Everybody's been wanting to do this, but nobody's gotten there yet. And I think we're going to be first ones to get there. And we're working very, very closely at Enigma Labs with the scientific research community. We've got a great relationship with many of them. So, um, and they're really backing us and helping because they want these tools. These are the tools that
So
a lot of scientists have been asking for a long time. So I'm really excited about what we're going to discover when we start to look at these cases and these
So you
trends.
guys are reaching out to all the various disciplines of science with this project.
Yeah. And you know what? You've got a great point there too with the different disciplines. A couple points on that. One, I think it's one of the problems that NIDS and Bigelow ran into, that they have a limited amount of scientists. And so a lot of the times they're researching things that are out of their wheelhouse. They don't really have an expert on, let's say, metallurgy
Mhm.
or chemistry. And they're looking at these things when they don't really have experts in those arenas. Eric Davis is also, who I mentioned earlier, who works with Bigelow and has worked on a lot of Black projects. He says this is kind of inherent in Black projects as well, one of the problems, because you have a limited amount of scientists that are read into the project. And let's say he's working with some process and he can't figure out how to make it work, but he knows a guy at University of whatsoever who's an
Right.
expert on this. Well, it'll take months, if not longer, to even talk to that guy about this because that guy's got to get a clearance. Then he's got to get read into the project. All of this is super expensive and takes a lot of time. So it's really hard to do good science in Black
Right.
projects. And so that's one reason he says, he's of the belief, and he has briefed Congress people on this. He believes that there have been crashes, like Roswell was real, and that we just couldn't make heads or tails of the craft in these Black projects. One of the reasons because there's so few scientists that can even get involved, and so these objects have just been locked up in a Indiana Jones type warehouse. And hopefully we can go revisit those once we have a better understanding of the science. That's what Eric Davis believes. But that's an example of how even he is kind of basing that belief off of how, your point, where you need a lot of scientists from different disciplines
They
to
have
be
to be willing
involved
to
with this
step
sort of
forward and work
research.
with you.
Yeah.
Hey, look, going forward from this point, there's a good question here that what do you think congressional hearings are going to reveal in the future? Do you think they're going to be more forthcoming, more transparent as time goes, Alejandro?
No, I think these reports are not going to have a lot of information. I think it's really hard for them to share information in the intelligence arena. I think it's hard because as much as I want to know, I also feel for them and their plight because it's hard to share that sort of information. And you probably want to err on the side of secrecy because we're dealing with important stuff here with Russian and Chinese.
Mhm.
Counterintelligence and
Right.
everything. So
Yeah.
they're really sensitive topics, so I'm
Do
not
you
sure.
do you think that panic that panic button is still out there with this, or do you think we're
That
slowly
people
getting
would
the
panic if they found
yeah?
out more? I don't know about that. I don't think so. I'm not so sure that was even ever proven. I think it'll all depend on how much it affects people's lives. And right now, UFOs, aliens are not affecting people's lives whatsoever. So if there was some kind of announcement that, yeah, we think they are aliens, but they're kind of flying around at 20,000 feet or higher,
Mhm.
these little probes, and whenever we get close to them, they run away. So they're not much to worry about. I don't think people would be surprised or really care that much.
Yeah. I mean,
It'd be exciting
the
and fun, but
the proof is that there are still unidentified objects in our skies, in our oceans. We don't know what they are. We don't know where they came
yeah.
from. We don't know who's so there's still a lot of speculation. Um, and we're about out of time here. Just a real quick question. I don't want this to be a trick question, but you're familiar with what's going on at Skinwalker Ranch. How do you think all of this research up there fits into what we've been talking about?
How does it fit in? I guess my knee jerk would be it doesn't, because unfortunately, they say they weren't able to do real science because they felt whatever it was one step ahead of them and kept them from really capturing anything substantial. So we don't have much data. We mostly have, yet again, anecdotal information for this stuff. It appears on the television show that they're getting lots of weird stuff that is potentially physical evidence. We'll see because we haven't really been able to analyze that information yet. And it's difficult. You can't do science on a TV show, but you can do some fun stuff,
You can do a
experiments like they've
lot of
been doing. Um, so we'll have to see. I think that's yet to be foreseen. But I would like to talk about the UFO Congress before we're out of time.
let's do real quick. We've got a couple of minutes left.
Okay. So yeah, there you go. The International UFO Congress coming up next week. So it's the 12th to the 16th here in Mesa, Arizona. Should be a ton of fun as usual. We've got a lot of great speakers. We've got Brian Bender, who I keep talking about. We're going to have a couple movies that will be, one will be premiered. One is James Fox's latest movie on the
Oh yeah.
Virginia event, where allegedly, some firemen kind of captured this alien essentially. The aerial phenomena, we're going to have the director of that, Randy Nickerson, and he's going to be sharing that movie. If you haven't seen it, it's an excellent movie. It is so, so good. But we're going to have Stacy Wright, head of Phoenix MUFON. She's going to be talking about the Phoenix Lights. That's her kind of first time doing a talk solo like that, so that'll be fun. We have Travis Walton, as usual, who I mentioned. Well, I didn't mention that. I was telling you guys, but I got to take Travis Walton with me when I took the Kardashians to Area 51. But you're going to have to
Right.
wait till come to the conference if you want to hear more about that story.
It,
Who else?
it,
I don't know. We got
and
Bryce Zabel,
yeah, Bryce is going to be there. You got David Marler,
Katie
um,
Grabowski, or Katie
Katie
Page
Katie Page
from
is going to attend.
Colorado.
Yeah, yeah. Patricia, can you pop up Alejandro's websites real quick?
Yeah, there
Yeah,
we go.
there.
So there's the app, Enigma Labs. Second one is SCU. And the last one is openminds.tv. So that was a website I ran for many years where we covered UFO news. It's still up. And I did find a couple magazine articles that I put up, one on Billy Meyer and one on Carl Jung and his UFO interests.
Yeah, you've got some very good stuff still up there on Open Minds TV.
Lots of great articles up there. We had lots of great writers. Antonio Huneeus, Jason McClellan, really good stuff.
So, we are out of time. There is Enigma. Check that out, folks. We're out of time. Alejandro, I want to thank you again for joining us. It's been
my pleasure.
It's the quickest hour in the day for me.
I know. Flies by.
So everyone, we will also have this program up on YouTube. And when you get to YouTube, please click on the like and certainly subscribe to us so we can continue with KGRA bringing all these kind of great programs and wonderful guys and I'd have to say a friend of mine besides an associate and a colleague, Alejandro Rojas. I've known you for 15 or 20 years, Alejandro, and it's just been a heck of a ride, hasn't it? We've seen a lot happen.
And it's
so everyone on behalf of Alejandro and my program manager, who is behind the scenes, Patricia Wilkinson, I'm your host here on Dark Window, and join us again next week for another amazing guest right here on KGRA's digital broadcast, Dark Window. Thank you, and good night, everyone.